we have a lot of faith in the USA. We have faith in the global markets. We have faith in the corporations that are driving these. And so we understand that right now there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, but we feel very confident about where we're headed and where we'll end up once we get past this. But we just have to get past this.
What will you do when your money works for you? Welcome to the Tech Girl Financial Podcast with your hosts, Victor and Kim Gaxiola. From the home office in California, here is Victor and Kim.
You know, when I envisioned the start of season 3, we started it completely different. We had an interview with an author to talk about a book. And then in the short span of a couple of weeks, everything changed. And we thought, oh, you can't just launch the 3rd season of the podcast and not address the biggest elephant in the room that came with the coronavirus pandemic. So, Kim, we're back to season 3. We got a lot to talk about, a lot to share.
So this is good news. We're on to season 3. And I guess the bad news is that we have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is definitely sobering. So apologies to Karen. We will get to your episode as soon as we can, but we feel the need to speak about what is going on and what is current right now.
Yep. And of course, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And I think what's really important is this podcast has always been a resource for us to share information and to try to come at it with a lens from financial planning or investment strategy design. But it's really trying to differentiate those things that are kind of important and interesting and the things that really matter to our clients, right? And to decipher that. So I think one of the things that I think is a very big responsibility for us, Kim, is to act almost as information curators, because there's a lot of noise right now. And so we cut through that clutter to really share the things that we think is important for the people who are listening.
Right. And also I'd like to say sometimes we have to decipher the code. If all news that comes out to you is just a bunch of noise, you've got to decipher the code and really break down what's important and what is just a bunch of fear and uncertainty.
And fear and uncertainty is exactly what's happening right now. Now, to be clear, we're not immunologists, so we're not going to go into the details. Everybody knows you should be washing your hands. You should be keeping your distance from people. If possible, stay home. If you have certain symptoms and you know what those symptoms are, contact your medical professionals. That's not what we really want to talk about. What we want to talk about is the financial markets. And right now they're being driven by fear, and you're seeing these fluctuations on a day-to-day basis where some days it goes up and other days it comes down, and it's trying to find its place.
Right. And so, it's really important to understand, just as much as we're not doctors or immunologists and don't have the facts completely understood ourselves when it comes to the science involved in the medicine, we also realize that there is a lot of unofficial, unlicensed people out there talking about financial topics that you need to be aware of, because a lot of times there's a huge amount of misinformation going on out there. Mm-hmm. And so we want to break it down to the important pieces.
And I think what you're really talking about, and this is what I take whenever I'm listening or watching the news, is trying to differentiate between, very credible sources versus sources that are more speculative. And you don't want to be drawn down that rabbit hole of the speculation, because that's when the anxiety starts happening. Right?
Yeah. One of the guys that we follow in economics, he always talks about math wins. And I always listen to the reporters and the news stories trying to understand the data that they give me, because it just doesn't make sense oftentimes. And so I think that that's really important here, is to understand what is possible, I like to say, versus what is probable.
And, the thing is that when you look at a situation like this, and it's been a while since we've actually faced a global pandemic, but fear driving the markets, or what we are considering like a black swan event, is not new to us, and it's not new to our country, and it's definitely not new to Wall Street. When you look at black swan events in our own lifetime that we've witnessed, this one, the pandemic. Probably before was a housing crisis in 2008, 2009. Prior to that, it was 911. Prior to that, it was Y2K. Prior to that, and you can keep going back and you will see this. So when you separate yourself and you look at the long view of, let's say, a 30 or 40-year chart of the market, you will see these little dips. And these dips, although significant in the moment, anxiety-producing in the moment, you still see the market continue to move in the right direction because we have a lot of faith in the USA. We have faith in the global markets. We have faith in the corporations that are driving these. And so we understand that right now there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, but we feel very confident about where we're headed and where we'll end up once we get past this. But we just have to get past this.
Right. And so we should start out also by just saying we are approaching this from the economic standpoint and the financial standpoint. We do not want to downplay how scary the actual virus is, how horrible it could be to lose a loved one to coronavirus, and the seriousness of the actual illness. I don't want to downplay that at all, but I do want to talk about the panic that hits the market where the numbers in the stock market just don't even make sense when you look at what the actual impacts will be.
Yeah, you look at the impact that it's having on individual corporations, which is one of the things that you take a look at. And, if you can just separate, the fear from, like I said, the data, and thinking about large corporations and how you can't really expect that they've lost a significant amount of their value over the course of a few weeks. It would take a lot longer for that to happen. So yes, the stock price may go down and it may go up, but go down. But I'm just saying from a percentage basis, we have to feel confident that these organizations, these companies, especially those that have very rich cash reserves, will be able to pick things up once the dust settles. And we start seeing a lot more hope in the market, or at least hope in our feelings that we are going to address this. We are going to beat this as we have in the past, and we're going to get past it.
Right. So I like to say it's the same panic wearing a different disguise, because I can't tell you how many people I talk to on a daily basis say this time it's different. And I say, no, it's not different. It's wearing a different disguise. It's a different monster, but it's still a monster. And we've seen it before. And so we know how it plays out. We've been here before. And just as much as your statement was probably overstating the value that you had in your accounts in February, I believe that right now your account statements are understating the value that you have.
And I would add that probably the best prescription for most people at this point would be, if you are really, anxious, turn off the TV. Really, just shut it off, because it's not really helping in the blood pressure when you start seeing that a lot of the news channels, this media-driven hype is driven to try to create a reaction, a visceral reaction. And for me, even, the heartbeat starts picking up and such, because all it seems to be is bad news. Mm-hmm. And it does feel that way, but it's not. It's not all bad news. There is good things happening as well.
So that's really something to talk about, is the idea that there's bad news out there and there's also good news, because a lot of times when we talk about the stock market, we just have this general concept of the stock market, and every now and then it becomes intertwined with Washington, D.C. And now in the past couple of days, we have been noticing the stock market move up and down, not necessarily because companies are changing drastically in 1 day or 2 days, but because of the outcome we think is going to come out of DC. But we really need to pull back. And this is one of the reasons why I love my clients to own stocks and be able to see what they own, is because if you're holding a growth fund, XYZ growth fund, you're not really sure what's in that growth fund. So maybe you feel more worried when the politicians are arguing about whether they're going to give us a package to help in this tough time or not. But if you're holding on to companies and you know who those companies are, and I'm not making a recommendation here, but I'll just say, what if you were owning Costco and you see the lines at Costco daily? In the end, even though this is a bad time, you're holding a good company in a year, 2 years, 3 years, they're probably going to still be around. Mm-hmm. And so that's when you have to think about that. Or even in the technology department, and you see Amazon, and you see all of these companies that we are using daily and thankfully have right now because we can't go into a physical office to do our work. It's pretty evident. And I'll say the other thing behind that is to hear of these companies. I heard, Nike's giving money to fight coronavirus, Apple's giving money, all of these large corporations who have a lot of cash right now on the sidelines because we were in a better financial situation going into this crisis, that are doing things in support of this. And here we don't hear those stories too often on the news, but this is the greater collaboration of corporate America and people. I hear as many great stories of people supporting local businesses to make sure that we're all chipping in when times get hard.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that once we come out of it, people still need to buy groceries. They still need computers. They still need to travel. They still need to buy cars. They still need to live in homes. So these things are going to continue. And these large corporations that are out there are going to be available for us even even when this gets past there. So there's no reason to believe that, the speculation and some of the negative stories that you're hearing in the media, they're exactly just that. They're speculative in many cases, and they're just driving fear. So, Kim, I came across a graphic, and this is from thecounselingteacher.com, and it was a great picture. I'm going to share it on our social media just because I think it's great. And it really just breaks down the world now into two things. And this is what we tell our kids and we tell each other. We remind ourselves that there are certain things you can control and there's certain things you can't control. And so the things that you can't control right now is if others are following the rules of social distancing. You can't control that, right? You know what to do. If others aren't doing it, if people are going to spring break or they're heading out to the beaches, that's on them. But you can control your own, social distancing. You can't control the actions of others. You can't predict what's going to happen or other people's motives. You can't control how others are going to react. You can't control how long this will last. And then the last one, this one made me smile, is you can't control the amount of toilet paper at the store.
Nope, you can't do that.
But
you can leave some for the next person.
That's true. That's true. Actually, that reminds me of the story I think I shared with you, but I thought it was cute, is in a couple of weeks before we got into the shelter in place, or no, it's about a week before we got into shelter in place, we went to a local supermarket here. And we walked in and it actually had toilet paper. And they were restricting it so that you could only buy 3 per household. And I was with Noah, and we went up there, we took a look, and there was enough for us to take 3. And I was going to take 3 just because I thought, I don't know how long this is going to last. And, everything around us, we were hearing how Costco was selling out. Everybody was selling out. Shelves were empty. You couldn't get it on Amazon. I thought this might be our only opportunity. And so I actually took 3, and it was Noah that said, "No, Dad, let's just take 2. We should leave another one for another family. 2 should be enough for us." I was really proud of him.
That's awesome. Yes.
For doing that and for saying that. And we did, and
yeah.
And I thought to myself, who knows where we're going to be a week or 2 from now? We're going to really be wishing we had that 3rd one.
No, but you know what? We sometimes get into this herd mentality, and that is so important to stop and take a glance at what you're doing. And, Noah did that. And then I think that was maybe like on Thursday or Friday, and Sunday we were live streaming our our mass. And, that was exactly what the priest said, is leave some for the rest of them. Don't hoard, and be kind, be generous, and don't be selfish.
That's
true. So, it was a really good message to hear at the time, very appropriate in considering these times. And, we all could be thoughtful.
Yeah, I was very proud of him, and and I learned something too, which is good. Now, switching gears, the things you can control. So these are the things we recommend you should focus on. You can control your attitude, be positive. You can control how you follow the CDC recommendations and your own social distancing. Turn off the news. You can control what's on, what you're watching. You can control how much you're engaged in social media. You can control finding fun things to do at home. And then finally, and I love this, is you can control your own kindness and grace. And so these are the things we can control, Kim.
Right. And so, I like to think of that. I'm listening to I'm listening to you say that list. And of course, I'm listening to the news all the time, but that's because it's so intertwined with what's going on in the stock market. But if that is not your job, then don't listen and just let me deal because I am there listening to it and trying to really decipher what was important versus what's noise.
Yeah.
And all of that.
And we here, the household, as you all know, Kim, myself, Mika, our senior in high school, and then, of course, Noah, who I just shared a little story with, we've been adjusting. We've been in a shelter-in-place mode in the state of California now for about a week, and I'm not exactly sure when this will come out, hopefully soon, but we've been able to make some adjustments in how we're spending our time here at home. So we wanted to share a little bit of, what you might consider doing if you find yourself in a situation where you're sheltering at home.
I know. Well, rule number one is watch what you're doing, because I decided to do some home projects and kept stubbing my toe on a bag of, the leftovers from this home project. And I should have moved it because I ended up stubbing my toe, and I'm like, yikes, I can't get injured now. I don't want to go to a hospital at this point in time. So you can control being careful and trying to avoid injuries, I guess, by being mindful of what's around you. But I'll say another thing is that, because I listen to the news so much during the day and I'm reading articles and whatnot, every now and then Victor likes to talk to me about this stuff at night, and I say, don't talk to me. I have my boundaries and I need to be respectful of them, because it is a hard and stressful time for me right now. And I need to take care of myself, or I'll have a hard time taking care of others.
That is true. And the last thing I was going to do is take you to a medical emergency room because you stubbed your toe. I mean, people have much bigger issues right now. So the toe stubbing was certainly something that was avoidable. Some of the things that we've been doing and making the most of our time and ensure that we're productive. Well, we continue to work. And fortunately, we do work, in a home office. And so that transition wasn't a challenge for us. But we are using this time to reconnect with our family. Now, we've always made it very important for us to have at least one family meal together, and we're doing that. But now we're bringing the kids in to help us with the preparation of the meal so that they're learning some life skills as well. So that's I see that as an extension of their education, because now the school district has finally come around to providing online instruction since the school's been closed for over a week. But I took this as an opportunity to think about things that we can help them with their own personal growth and some of the education that they can learn at home, cooking,
home maintenance,
painting, doing some home projects. And so, we're painting Mika's room, and we're probably going to move on to doing some stuff in Noah's room. So, if you're homebound, the way I like to think about it is I'm on a spaceship, and deep space is outside. And even though I like to go for walks with Nano and, make sure we get a little bit of exercise when we're home, is how can we make the best use of this time? And so there's that long list of what we call the honeydew projects of things that we've been backburnering. Should we do this? Or guess what? We've got the time now. And so when we're not working, we're devoting ourselves to looking at these projects so we can make the best use of that extra time.
And I would also encourage you just to slow down. I mean, this is the time of year we are getting closer to May, which is typically a really busy time. Some people have first communions, graduations, sports events, end of the year, school activities. There's so much that goes on in May leading into June. That we can just take advantage of this time to be with your family all in one place and just slow down. I think in the end, I'm a spiritual person, so I have to make some positive out of this scaring situation right now. And I have to believe that maybe, God or the higher power that you believe in is telling us to slow down.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I'm talking about how to be productive and you tell people to slow down. So see, you've got options, which is good. I also took this as an opportunity for some personal growth. So we like to cook, and I say we're sharing that with the kids. But I've had a bass guitar that's just been sitting there that I've been wanting to learn how to play. And guess what? I'm going to start learning how to play the bass guitar. And Kim, welcome to all the jam sessions. You're very fortunate to get these jam sessions with the whole family playing for you.
I know, and I have been wanting to get back on the piano as well, and just maybe I'll find some time for that. But I should tell you, where I'm standing, I haven't really had that much free time except for the weekends. Yeah,
but you still need to bring the rain stick, because we need the rain stick on a lot of our jam sessions, and you're really good at that, just flipping it.
I want a more important job than that rain stick.
Yeah. Other things that we recommend is, leisure time, so downtime. We're catching up on movies, catching up on books, and the things that we've been wanting to binge watch. Kim is very disappointed that there's no more Love is Blind available to her. She needs season 2.
I admit that was a guilty pleasure. But I just saw something really interesting come up on Netflix, and that was a series called Self-Made, which is really a great inspirational story, again, about, the first African-American woman to become a millionaire and selling beauty products, producing and selling beauty products, and back in the early 1900s. Great story. The American dream is still alive today as it was back then. And I think in times like this, that's a good reminder. So very fun series to watch.
That's true. So there's certainly a number of different activities that you can take or not during this time that you're homebound. But we want to remind everybody that we are here for you and available, and you can certainly reach out to us. And some of the things that we've done to really step up our game is we know that information and communication is extremely important, especially in times of uncertainty. And so every week we have a new landing page on our website that you can follow to take a look at some of the latest and greatest as it relates to stories and insights and some of the things that we've curated that we think are important for people to know about. We do post very regularly on our Facebook page. So the Tech Girl Financial Facebook page, I think, is one of the main resources for links and information and events and updates. So we encourage you to do that. We're also on Instagram, which pretty much mirrors a lot of the stuff that we're doing on Facebook. But of course, it's more a visual medium. And plus, we use that also for a lot more inspirational messages and motivation and to keep things light and happy. And then finally, we've been using Vimeo video. So hopefully you've all by now seen the video of Kim addressing the situation. We're hoping to do more of that because we think people do like the video. And so all of these are resources that are available to you, us sharing information and letting you know that we're here.
Right. And I just want to end again, and I cannot reiterate enough. Just because something is possible doesn't mean that it's probable. And so when you're looking at everything, I encourage you and challenge you to ask, how probable is it that it's going to happen? Because that may help you decipher.
So when we talk about credible sources, we talk about the people that we feel comfortable, that we trust when it comes to information. And we hope that that's how you see us in trusting us with the information. We certainly don't take that responsibility lightly. And so to that end, when all of this started with the coronavirus, I myself had a lot of questions, and I myself was looking, who can I ask and who can I talk to that can help me, understand it a little bit better. And then the more I thought about it was, and how could they help the people that we serve and the people that we work with? And so to that end, we're going to end the podcast today with the audio portion of an interview that I had with a good friend of mine, Dr. Jason Bellak, who is a doctor working at the Oklahoma Institute of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology. And we sat down and I asked him some questions. And what I really wanted to understand is, what are you telling your patients and what are you telling the people that you work with about the coronavirus? And what should we be concerned about and what should we be looking for? And so what follows is the audio portion of a video we recorded. The video is also available on our website. It's also available on our social media, but this is the audio. So if you're walking the dog or if you're driving, you shouldn't be, right? But if you're walking the dog or you're at home just listening to the podcast, here is the interview. We hope you enjoy it. But before that, Kim, did you have any final thoughts?
My final thoughts are just that we know this is an uncomfortable time and very uncertain, but we've had uncertainty before and we will get through this. So keep your head high and watch what's positive happening out there.
So as always, we want to thank you for listening to our podcast, and hopefully this has provided at least some comfort. But again, we reinforce the fact that if you are concerned and you want to talk to us and you need to get a hold of us, just give us a call or reach out to us on email or on any of our social channels. We'll be happy to talk to you. So with that, here is the interview with Dr. Jason Bellak. And I hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you soon. Bye. Hello, this is Victor Gaxiola with Tecro Financial, and joining me today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Jason Bellak from the Oklahoma Institute of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology. Hopefully I said that right. I always massacre it. But thanks for joining us today, Jason.
Thank you, Victor.
Now, Jason and I, just in full disclosure, have known each other for many, many years, and I really appreciate him taking the time to share his thoughts based on his position, working with his patients on talking about what's on everyone's mind right now, which is the coronavirus pandemic. So thank you for joining us, Jason. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Well, currently living and practicing in the Oklahoma City area. I also have an office in Norman. My area of practice is allergy and immunology. And what that means is I care for patients with a range of diseases from environmental, drug allergies, asthma, and other chronic lung diseases. And importantly, in our discussion here, patients with immunodeficiency diseases. So those are patients that have difficulty fighting infections. Mm-hmm. The immune system touches many fields of medicine, but it's important to know that my wheelhouse is really patients that have trouble fighting infections normally versus, say, a rheumatologist who cares for people that have autoimmune disease. I'm trained in internal medicine and practiced general medicine for 10 years in rural central Wisconsin before practicing allergy and immunology full-time. At my practice, I also am the vice president of the practice, and in the past have been medical director of emergency departments as well. So I've been on the front lines of issues in healthcare, acute issues in healthcare in the past, and have seen and been part of the disaster preparedness as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of things that you'll be sharing with us are obviously from your opinion, and no one should take this as medical advice. But I do know that you're working with your patients and that a lot of it has to do with allergies as we approach allergy season and such. But what are you telling your patients about the coronavirus pandemic?
Thank you for clarifying that. This is all my opinion and shouldn't substitute for the medical advice that you would get from your own personal physician. Mm-hmm. One of the most important things that we all need to remember is that the patients that do the best when they get sick, whether it's from the current coronavirus epidemic or other illnesses, are patients that are in good shape to begin with. So one of the most important things that we can all do is make sure that you're keeping up to date with your normal health, preventative health care. Mm-hmm. And for my patients, for example, with asthma and allergies and immune deficiency disorders, making sure that they're being seen regularly and having updated action plans for these type of scenarios. So it's important that if we use asthma as an example, is that their baseline asthma is well controlled and they have an action plan in place if they are to get sick, what they can do to self-treat based on that action plan. And then if they are not getting well on the action plan, when to contact us. So that's the most important thing. So I think we've done a much better job as healthcare providers, in the most part, of keeping patients well. And then the very sick patients often need tertiary healthcare, for example, ICU beds, and in some cases, ventilator care management. And that's the current issue with the very sick patients with the COVID-19 illness. Even though I'm going a little beyond what you asked, but even though we have done a great job of increasing those ICU beds, because in general, those are the patients that are getting hospitalized a lot of times. There are times like this that could potentially overwhelm the healthcare system and the amount of those ICU beds. So circling back, it's important that they stay well, follow previous action plans, and that we all listen to our public health specialists, which are on the front lines of identifying the risk associated with emerging illnesses, including the COVID-19, and following the recommendations closely. I have the utmost respect for the folks at the CDC, the World Health Organization, and the NIH, including Dr. Fauci, who's been on every news channel and has been on the front lines of emerging illnesses, starting with HIV in the early 80s. So I think it's important that we follow their recommendations, including the social distancing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a lot of the conversations and the things that people have been sharing are, what to look for and how the COVID-19 differentiates from a flu, from a common cold, from a fever. And the thing that strikes me is that one of the key differentiators is that dry cough, that you don't have a runny nose, but you do run a fever. So it would be hard to detect initially, because it does seem to emulate a lot of the typical flu symptoms or common cold symptoms. At what point should somebody get concerned and think that maybe I should seek medical advice or get tested?
That's a great question. We are in the peak of my normally busy season. Tree season, things are pollinating, so there's a lot of itching and sneezing and dripping, and we're also in the peak respiratory virus season. So it's kind of the tail end of the normal influenza season, but it's also the busier season for your common cold viruses, including rhinovirus and something called adenovirus. So it can get tricky in your typical season when we're trying to differentiate, is it allergies or cold? Certainly fever. Even though we call allergies hay fever, there's no fever. Temperature increase typically involved. So, and fever for just the most strict definition is greater than 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'll say, in general, adults don't get febrile illnesses very much. It's much more common for kids. So an adult with a febrile illness means something's going on. And this time of year, I would still think, even though the COVID-19 illness is the current pandemic, it's still more common to have a common cold and influenza than it is COVID-19. So fever would be the main thing. Now, right, a dry cough makes me think more of a viral illness or somebody that may be having an asthma or COPD exacerbation. So the combination of fever, cough, and shortness of breath. Anytime you're short of breath, that's going to be concerning. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that people need to do if they have those symptoms is to contact their medical professional. And like a lot of practices, the Oklahoma Institute of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology has a telehealth program that we've initiated for sick patients or other patients that need healthcare visits that maybe can't or shouldn't come into the office. Also, as a resource, that the CDC has listed the 24/7 hotline numbers for the Department of Health in every state. And that number, if you contact a number, they'll give you directions on necessary testing if it's appropriate, and give you information where and how to do that. I know many healthcare systems have started doing COVID-19 testing using commercial labs, and that's been a big relief to everybody because we can do more testing. But in general, when you have this illness or any of the illnesses that are currently going around, the influenza, common cold, staying at home is important, and doing general supportive symptomatic care. So rest, increased fluids, acetaminophen for fevers and aches and headaches. There's some controversy about nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory use, ibuprofen, naproxen, things like that, and the potential worsening of the illness. And we just don't know that yet. There's no good definite data, but I'm advising my patients if they don't have liver disease or some other reason not to take acetaminophen or Tylenol to take that instead. Hopefully that answered your question.
No, it did. Absolutely. No, all good things to consider. I mean, I think a big part of it and a lot of the concern from the healthcare community is it not wanting to overwhelm the system, which is one of the main reasons why isolation, social distancing is really important. And here in the state of California, specifically in Northern California, in the 7 counties around the Bay Area, we have been placed on a shelter-in-place mode, which is to say that we are encouraged to stay home, to not go out unless it's absolutely essential, to go to the bank, grocery store, or fill your car up with gasoline, but to try to minimize the amount of gathering. What would you say to someone that says that we're overreacting?
Well, we all have a social responsibility for our neighbors, our family members, and particularly our older patients or family members with especially any comorbid diseases like kidney disease or heart disease, et cetera. The thought of this just a month ago or 2 months ago would have been outrageous to anybody. I think this is always something that public health officials have had as an idea, but what was called draconian, or what I've heard has been called draconian in China, has really suppressed and mitigated the spread of COVID-19 disease. I think the most recent I heard was one new case in Wuhan yesterday, and that's unbelievable. So there's this whole idea of that everybody's heard of flattening the curve, which not only hopefully decreases the amount of disease, but how quickly or how high that peak gets. So we spread out the cases and decrease the impact that it has on the healthcare system and the ability to care for patients. So there are patients, or there are folks that don't show many signs of the illness. They tend to be younger, healthier. And again, going back to what I initially said, I think we would all do better fighting any illness. The healthier we start off when we're fighting something. And there's this thought that sometimes, especially in younger folks, that they're indestructible and it won't bother them. But I think, and I saw this on a news program today of how important it is for our most vocal millennial patients and friends and children, that they really use the power of their presence and social media outreach to be supportive of complying with these difficult recommendations, but I think they're absolutely necessary. And the shelter in place is it's more prohibitive than other places in the country, but because of your disease activity, I think you're ahead of the curve there, and that's more likely to happen in additional communities rather than not in the next several days.
Yeah. I mean, and as we were discussing before the recording, I mean, for one thing, I think what has provided some comfort, and I'm always amazed by the resolve, of individuals, especially after times, and we've lived through 9/11, we've lived through the financial crisis, we've lived through, you and I, the Los Angeles riots when we went to UCLA.
Yes. Earthquakes.
And the earthquakes, right.
Well, I think, interestingly, I think we are as prepared in certain ways for something like this to happen than ever before. Just the fact that we can have this conversation from several thousand miles away, and you're sheltering in place, but you shouldn't be socially isolated. We have the ability to pick up phones and call a video conference and do kind of the business as usual more than I think we give ourselves credit for. So I think that's important that we continue to do that and continue to have social and professional contacts that and use the technology that we have, which is such a great resource.
I agree, and really for me, and I think that this is the feeling I'm getting from friends and family in this area, is that we're all going through this together, and at least having a direction of shelter in place is providing a prescription that whether you have the disease or not, or if you're suffering from it, everybody knows what they need to do and how they can be responsible about it.
Absolutely, and I think the president just today, the 15-day plan that's available on the .gov website, as well as the specific coronavirus website on the CDC, and they're all very simple, practical, common sense things that we all need to do to get through this quicker and more safely.
Well, if nothing else, it's introduced good habits. We're all washing our hands more. We're being more mindful of our neighbors. I certainly will try very hard in the future never to run short of toilet paper.
Yeah.
Don't know where that came from. But my big question here is, Jason, in your opinion, when will we know that it's over, or that we're at the the tail end of this?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and it's rapidly developing. They're doing very sophisticated modeling based on previous outbreaks, including the previous SARS outbreak. So, what's important to know, the terminology kind of gets muddled, but SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. COVID-19 is the disease from the virus. So the analogy is HIV and AIDS. So HIV is the virus and AIDS is the disease. So if we look at the previous SARS outbreak, that lasted really until July. So I think that's where the most recent government announcements have come from. A typical virus season that I spoke of earlier, that we typically see this time of year, is over by the end of May, typically. So you have your flu season, which really typically peaks December through February, and then you have some common cold viruses, etc. And that generally ends by end of April, May, and it coincides with warmer weather. Now, there's theories of why that may happen, including colder, drier air may increase the ability for droplets to spread and things like that. But I think it's important to know that we've made these recommendations, including the shelter in place, and that people don't get worried when the numbers are still going up because it's lagging behind the recommendations. And of course, there are some times where patients are asymptomatic before they're diagnosed. So there's going to be some worse data coming out before it improves, and knowing that that's going to happen, and that's typical and to be expected. And so once we start to see that peak, and we're not exactly sure what that's going to be yet, and those numbers go down after we've instituted some of these more strict social guidelines, then we'll know things are getting better. And knowing that once people are getting better, there's another few days of social distancing where they still may have viral shedding, and they may need to stay at home. But it's also important to know that 80+% of people that get the SARS-CoV-2 virus recover without any significant issues. And it still remains a mystery, but thankfully our youngest ones, including infants, and we're not exactly sure about pregnant females, but they're always considered high risk. There really hasn't been a significant disease burden in those folks. What we don't know is if they're vectors or carriers and transmitters. So that's why it's important that schools are closed. And you and I both have daughters who are seniors in high school, and it's a difficult time. And even my teenage daughter, I think, is coming around and understanding her social responsibility, that she understands that we're doing this for a reason. And the sooner we all do what is requested of us and follow our social responsibility, the sooner this will end.
Yeah, it's one of these situations where it's going to take all of us, I think, in order to resolve this and start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So, Jason, I know that you're very active, unlike many other doctors who are not, but you're very active on social media. You're constantly or very regularly on the media being interviewed. And so we really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with us. We'd love to get you back on the program, maybe in as these things progress. But before I let you go, if people wanted to get in touch with you, your practice, or understand, some of the information that you're sharing, what would be some of their best resources for that?
Well, I'll throw in a plug for my national organization. So the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology and the American College of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology both have find an allergist immunologist on their website. So if you need a local specialist, that's the first place to go. And I'm also on there. You could also find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter and direct message me there. Those would probably be the easiest ways to get a hold of me. My company website is okayallergy.com. OK for Oklahoma. We're great allergists, but we're in Oklahoma.
Yeah, you are.
So you can find us there. And I wish everybody well, and we will all get through this.
Yes, we will. And this is coming straight from the man who coined the ragweed tsunami.
Ragweed tsunami.
Yeah, right.
In August.
In August.
We get through that.
We're ready for that.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, thank you so much. All the best to Jen, Izzy, and the boys. Please send them our love, and hopefully.
Thank you, and the same to your family. And Kim is incognito. She's missing in action. But
she's probably taking a call right now. So she's yeah.
Good. All right. See you, bud.
Thank you.
If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, please send an email to victor@techgirlfinancial.com or join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag AskTGF. We also encourage you to follow us on the Tech Girl Financial page on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. TechGirl Financial and Cambridge Investment Research, Inc. are not affiliated companies.
Skrrr.